Hey, everybody. Good morning again. So, I just went and spoke with the Federal Bureau of Investigation because I reported that death threat that was online. And so that's great. That is great. It almost felt like I was under some kind of interrogation, which it needed to be done because the FBI, when I'm reporting a death threat, they want to understand context. They want to understand context. They want to know what would elicit someone to go to an extreme to, commit an act of violence, which is a death threat. And so I gave them the whole background on what was going on with Jilly Juice. I gave them the whole background. So for those of you joining in, yes, I went and reported that death threat, and they in turn wanted me to come in there, and I did. And it was very much like, it's a fortress there. And so I gave up my phone, and they checked to make sure I didn't have any guns on me, of course. And it was like a good cop, bad cop type of thing, which is not a bad idea because I understand interrogation. I get it. You got to interrogate the perpetrator of crime, and you got to interrogate the victim. You must just figure out what this situation is. And so, yeah, it was a little trippy because I'm like, after watching all those Chris Watt videos and the Jodi Arias, I'm like, oh my God. And so, I looked around, and of course there's the cameras, and I know they're recording the whole thing, and I understand that. But for them to understand where I'm coming from and what prompted this report to begin with, they had to figure out what caused this. And so I went over the Dr. Phil thing, and since I am putting myself out there, they're like, hey, you got to be careful, and be careful of like lawsuits, or be careful of anything, right? And I'm like, yeah, I understand. And they're asking me, are you a doctor? Are you this? Are you that? I'm like, no. And I don't even know who this guy was that did that death threat. But I never portrayed myself as a doctor either. But I understand. They're curious to figure out who the hell I am. What person could elicit this much hate? And it's a trip. It really is. And so then we were talking about Bruce Wilmot, and they asked me, well, has anyone died from this? And I'm like, nobody has died from this. Now, someone that was in hospice that may have done this, they passed away, but they were already in hospice. They had pancreatic cancer, and they were deemed done by the system. They had to go home and basically pass away. So then it leads me to my next thing, and I'm thinking about, she was mentioning something about a lawsuit and all that. Good morning, Karen. And I'm like, what would a lawsuit do? A lawsuit is saying that this juice would kill someone. And I'm looking at them like, okay, so when you take just salt but no water, and you're forcing someone to just take salt and that's it, one element, no different than just flooding somebody's system with just water, no different than flooding somebody's system with just mercury or gas, yeah, they would die from that. But we're not doing that with Jilly Juice. Okay, we're not forcing people just to take salt and that's it. There's water, there's lactobacillus, and there's nutrients, and there's cabbage. Oh, lovely cabbage. Something like, okay, and then we're talking about antibodies. And I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking like antibodies. Antibodies. And there's surface marker antibodies, which is the blood types. So they're marked. Every single vaccination you get is an antibody that's marked. Okay? So now I'm telling you guys, okay, if you don't want to get a vaccination because you've already been exposed to a virus, go get a titer test to show the antibodies. Okay, so when someone gets a vaccination or they've been exposed to a pathogen that creates antibodies, your body goes into inflammation. It starts creating antibodies. And then you start seeing symptoms. You may feel hot, you may feel lethargic, you may even see skin conditions, skin eruptions, you may feel lightheaded, headache, you might feel like a flu type of symptom. That is a mutation. And that is a death. Now, it's not a death to the whole body because you still have 90% of your body that's not dying. But as soon as you take in a pathogen, that is a death of a cell. 1, 2, 5, 10, 20,000 cells. But if you have like trillions and trillions of cells, then 20,000 cells that are dying is not going to kill a person off. But what kills people off is the fact that there is no cell regeneration. So you may be, 20% dead, and as you age, you're like 30% dead, 40% dead, 50% dead, 60% dead, 70% dead, and then bam, 90% dead, and then bam, 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 99 to 100% dead. And what is that based off of? That's based off of the antibodies that are multiplying, the pathogens that are turning into antibodies. And so when someone has like pancreatic cancer or all these different, like cervical cancer, ovarian cancer, when people die from a specific, when they have a major condition and they die from it, if you actually did a titer test, you can see the prevalent antibodies that are present at the time of death, and they're marked because disease doesn't just materialize. It gets introduced. When it gets introduced, there's an actual marker on the antibody because that pathogen is marked. So is the antibody. How do they know how many vaccines you received when they do a blood test? How do they know how many antibodies that you have to then fulfill the vaccine requirements? They already have it listed in a database over in the labs in biotech. So when someone dies of natural causes, like pancreatic cancer, and someone wants to sue me because they took jelly juice, I'd want to see a titer test. A titer test of exactly what antibody was most prevalent at the time of the death. And I think all of you should start taking that into account and thinking about that when someone does die. What is the most prevalent antibody present at the time of death? Because when you get a vaccine or a green vaccine, okay, that you are getting antibodies and they're most prevalent at the time. So imagine with jelly juice. So what does jelly juice do? There's no antibodies in salt. There's no antibodies in cabbage. There's no antibodies in water. So what does jelly juice do? It energizes a system to bring up those surface marker antigen antibodies. That's what jelly juice does. It brings it to surface, and then the body is trying to work its way out, work those pathogens out of the body. So when you're taking all your pills, powders, and supplements and detoxes and worried about the vaccines, but you're not purging out those surface marker antigen or keeping them at bay, guess what? They multiply. And that's what people are dealing with cancer, disease, and chronic illness, is that all these surface marker antigen that turn into antibodies are attacking your specific organs. And then when somebody dies, they're like, oh, it's by natural causes. We're not going to do any autopsy. The autopsies are really for people who are murdered, to figure out what stab wounds they had, what gunshots, and all of that. But when it comes to actual natural causes, no one does any autopsy to figure out what the actual, they'll say, yeah, they died of pancreatic cancer. Well, how the hell did they get pancreatic cancer to begin with? Oh, it's their diet. Why don't we take a look at the different antibodies that are present in the body, the natural killer cells, because they are marked, because they've been introduced. If disease was so prevalent all over this earth, we wouldn't have any humans left. They would have died a long time ago because they didn't have vaccines back in the caveman days. They didn't have vaccines back in the Indian days. So it makes you wonder, okay, so if they can survive in the Indian lands without a vaccine or a green vaccine, then, why do we need them? They weren't dying from diabetes in the Indians. Now, maybe they did. I don't know. Anybody a Native American out there in my audience? What before the white man came in and messed up everything, gave you guys alcohol, what was the predominant thing somebody died from in the reservation, or before the reservation? No, because that's when things got cattywampus. When they were all over, chasing the buffalo, what did they die from? Maybe they were gored by a buffalo. Maybe, woolly mammoth killed them. Maybe someone got hit by a bow and arrow by mistake. Maybe they ate the wrong berry by mistake, overwhelmed their system, took them down. But no, in this society, in Western society, we are getting introduced to pathogens that also trigger menstruation at an earlier age, because reproduction is tied to the pathogens and the death trajectory to keep the species going. So now I've given the anti-vax community a way out of not getting the vaccines. I gave you guys a way out. Hold on. Hey, babe, I'm on Facebook Live. I'll talk to you back. I'll call you back. All right. I gave you guys a way out. Go get a titer test, because every single vaccination that's out there that's being administered, those pathogens are already in the environment. So you being exposed to somebody will give you the antibodies, even if you didn't get the vaccine. Because you don't have to get the vaccine to get the antibodies. Just being exposed to someone that's newly vaccinated, that's shedding, will give you the antibodies. So all you got to do is go send in for a request to test, get a titer test of every single thing that's out there. And now you know all the antibodies, the surface marker antibodies that are in your body, and there's a name for them. And if there's a new one, it means there's a new pathogen that they created. Who they are, I don't know. Biotech, somebody? So if there's a new vaccine, then there's probably a new pathogen, and you will see that. So at the time of somebody's death, find out which antibody was most present. And then Kara said, I've heard whistleblowers, coroners say that they are forbidden to write on the autopsy report death by vaccine. Yeah, because that's so vague. You don't even want to say death by vaccine, because that's so vague, Karen. That's why that won't hold up in court. That is very vague. You actually have to have the specific pathogen that this person was overwhelmed by, and it attacked their vital organs. It attacked their vital organs. So if the measles virus went and attacked their pancreas, or attacked, not even their pancreas, let's say attacked their heart, then you can make a direct correlation that when did this measles virus get introduced? Now you have a titer test that shows, and then that when it was introduced, which was either by in the environment or by the vaccine, whichever, it doesn't matter, because this is what was introduced. And then we can say, well, it's not by the vaccine, then it just materialized. But we know that disease doesn't just materialize. So somebody that got recently vaccinated, whoever they are, gave it to that person. So no matter what, it's still tied to a vaccine. It's still tied to a virus that was introduced to the environment. And you don't know where exactly you picked it up, but it was been introduced to the environment. And so we have more people looking at what antibody is most present at the time of death. You can start seeing a pattern, but it takes time. It's gathering data for that intention. How organized are we? Oh, not really, because guess what? We have anti-vaxxers that are all bitching about how their kid is maimed, but they won't do anything to go and substantiate. I try to give some of these anti-vaxxers key things to start looking at and considering, and they ignore my information. So no, there is no way for us to gather this data in an organized fashion, because we're not organized. You're all splintered off into your activist thing, and you're not doing anything to gather the data to then establish a pattern. because there is a pattern out there. We just got to be organized enough to establish it. But the anti-vax community is so splintered off, there's no way they can be organized to really be effective in their platform. There's no freaking way. So those of you who are dealing with kids that have been maimed by vaccines, allegedly, go get a titer test on your child. Go see what the most prevalent antibody is that's causing the inflammation, that's causing the symptoms. And then you start making that connection that that last vaccine that your kid received created this inflammation because they were fine right before. They were fine right before they received that vaccine. And there is your substantiation. And then take it to the next extreme, which is someone actually dies. Then you look and see what antibody is prevalent. Oh, wow, it's the measles vaccine or the surface marker antigen that is most prevalent when this baby or this human passed away. There is your substantiation. No different than when somebody wants to see that you've been vaccinated, you just get a titer test and show the antibodies that are present in your system. And you don't necessarily have to get the vaccine. You can be exposed to someone that's been recently vaccinated and you get that antibody already in your system. And I posted this in that vaccine group and they let it go through. Thank God, because I was wondering if they were going to let that post go through. And I'm not even promoting Jilly Juice in the anti-vax group that I posted that in. I just want to give you guys a way out. And then hopefully I can peel back more of the layers that some of you anti-vaxxers are refusing to peel back because of the hormones that you're circulating within, because of your activism. Go get the data. If you have a kid that has been vaccine injured, go get the data. Substantiate your claims. It does not make sense to blame the vaccine industry with no proof. Hearsay is no proof. Correlation does not mean causation until you can substantiate. Okay, so that's why nobody can come after me, because when someone actually dies, it would mean, if from the salt, it would mean that be at their house forcing salt down their throat where they have no other balancing force like water or anything else. And I'm not selling any product. So when you take my product, you are premeditated in every single thing that you do, which shows that you are making a conscious choice to go and explore my recipe. And so, you know, and then when someone passes away, right, and maybe they had the juice somewhere as a factor, well, salt has never been known to kill anybody in the presence of water. So then you got to go do a titer test or an autopsy/titer test to figure out what exactly shut down the vital organs to cause them to pass away. This is why I say use the system to your advantage. Just like when I went in to talk to the FBI today, as above, so below. The victim can be just as guilty as the perpetrator because it depends upon who created who. So I understand their tactics. It was a trip. You know, it's not like I love voluntarily going and get interrogated by any government agency, but it had to be done so they can see, you know, what it is that I'm going through. And so obviously, I mean, they do their investigation on whoever it is that made that death threat. But they also can hear my side of the point of view too. The young lady wasn't exactly, she was skeptical. Maybe she was the bad cop, right? You know, good cop, bad cop. And the guy was a bit more, you know, gentle in his approach, understood. So it was interesting. I mean, just watch, and I when I look in the room, and of course the room is stark. I mean, no different than any interrogation room that you've seen. But I understood if I'm going to make a claim as a victim, I will be treated as if I was also the perpetrator too. That's what you have to understand. Victims and perpetrators are in the same context in a lot of ways, in the eyes of the law. Hey, Masa. So even though it triggered me a little bit to like, oh my God, I feel like I'm being interrogated. But no, they have to understand what exactly elicited this type of action or reaction from somebody. So, I mean, it's fine. So anyone that's a victim, where are you also responsible really is what the FBI was saying. And also to protect yourself. Call 911. Be a concealed carry weapons person. These are the potential pitfalls.
But then it had me thinking about, someone trying to do a lawsuit against me, and I'm thinking like, what would, no, when you look at, especially someone in hospice, they already have a massive amount of natural killer cells that are marked in their body. Biotech knows exactly why every person dies, because the antibodies are marked. The antigen has been introduced, and then it creates antibodies. It's a marker. The blood types are surface marker antigen. And I'm sure all the antigen in that blood type is all the data has already been gathered on every single piece of antigen. So when you're a B, so those of you that are B positive or B positive blood type, go get your titer test to see what comprises a B positive blood type. Surface marker antigen creates antibodies. The antibodies in your body will then tell you what's in a B positive blood type. Start making the connections. Start making the connections. But the titer test is probably the most important data all of you need to arm yourselves with, so you know exactly what you're in for, as well as what case you want to have against any doctor that forced vaccinated yourself, or anyone that did that. You can prove negligence. Should this person who has already all these mutations and sicknesses, should have they received a vaccine that would have killed them? No, they shouldn't have received that vaccine. It's what killed them. But I'm going to say the vaccine, what was the specific antigen in the vaccine? So if it was an MMR shot, the measles, mumps, and rubella, and then they look and see which antibody is present, and most of the measles virus is present, and this person died, and how they died because of an attack, all these natural killer cells were attacking one of their vital organs. Right there will tell you what killed the person. It's the surface marker. It's the antigen, the antibodies that are marked. Okay? So understand how all this works. And salt doesn't have antibodies. So salt, especially with the cabbage juice, won't kill anybody, but it'll bring up already what you are dealing with, what you're afflicted with. And pain is healing. That's what I had to tell one of the FBI agents. Pain is healing. What people do when they're in pain, they go take drugs. And I told them, I'm against drugs. I'm not a drug addict. And I don't chase hormones either. They probably think I'm some crazy. I know they probably think I'm a little crazy. I would love to see that tape. I would love to see that whole interview that I did today. I would love to see it. Because I know I was just like, because I mean, when you introduce something that somebody already has skepticism and they already seen the Dr. Phil shows, they're like watching I sent them the link. And then of course you look all over the internet and my God, I mean, it's crazy. Oh, she's killing everybody, and then they're all like, oh my God, be careful. You might get, a lawsuit. I'm like, no, everybody makes recommendations, and even how you pose it. It's no different than somebody saying, oh, you should take, this Plexus. It'll help do this, this, and this. If you force somebody and you're posing as if you were a doctor saying that this is going to do this, but even then, there's no lawsuit. I mean, I guess there could be, but then, hey, I'll just come back as a defamation of character because I never posed myself as a doctor. I gave everybody the outcome, or the different healing symptoms. And cabbage water and salt is not a drug. And I've always said it's the potential to regrow limbs and organs. Pain is healing. And so when you check out where your pain comes from and you do a titer test, and you have pain in your abdomen or pain somewhere, right? You do a titer test, and maybe you can get a count of how many antibodies you have for each specific antibody that's present. Do they go that deep? If you have the MMR, you have the yellow fever, you have all these different diseases, right? Will it have numbers present on how many antibodies are present for that specific pathogen? That's what I'm wondering. because that even can give you even more data to establish a pattern. So cabbage water and salt does not have antibodies, so it does not kill. And nobody's just taking spoonfuls of salt, and that's it. Because there's chemistry involved. No different than drinking sodas. But that's the thing, when I get people who are skeptical and they think that I'm killing everybody with salt, that's the first thing they go to, is they think that I'm just giving them straight up salt and that's it. And it's a natural reaction based upon all of the crazy, trolls and the climate out there when it comes to this protocol. But we're also looking at a different outcome. We're looking at life indefinitely. We've got to energize your immune system with the nutrients to repair the damage from those initial introductions to these pathogens that turn into natural killer cells or antibodies. Okay? So today I had all the expectation of how today was going to be when I talked to the FBI. As above, so below. And it's no different. Like I say to you guys that claim to be victims, you're no different than the perpetrator. Where is your responsibility? And where can you take accountability? But I could have not reported, but you know what? We should report anything that shows that there are crazy people out there and to watch out. So yes, the FBI will be watching me, and that's a good thing. They'll be watching my Facebook, watching who logs on, watching whoever it is that says what and does what. And I'm fine with that because I got nothing to hide. Absolutely nothing. And I'd rather have them watch me and know what's going on than not. They have access to my Facebook. They know who I am, of course. And I am not anti-government, because the reason why the government's there is to keep law and order, is to keep the peace, and to make sure that there is, there isn't anyone doing anything nefarious to anybody. And they have to check me out too to make sure that I'm not doing anything nefarious. Of course, they got to look at this, who's this victim here? Who is this victim here? And I was like, hey, I take responsibility. I may have introduced this in the beginning that wasn't exactly diplomatic, and I did mention procreation categories, and it gets very political. And so yes, it does elicit hate because of people's, background around discrimination. I get it. I understand. So I changed the way in which I did and said stuff. Okay. So yes, I take full responsibility for how this information gets received. And when things don't go the way you expect, it's because I had lack of awareness. Now I'm changing the way in which I speak. Now I am presenting different information and better information to give people more, data to work with so they can make the best choice for themselves. And it's all a learning process. It all is a learning process. Don't expect to be perfect right out of the gate. So it is what it is. And unfortunately, Dr. Phil is had me frozen in time of when I was still discovering new things. So that's what everybody's reacting from, is the Dr. Phil show, right? And that's what I told him, hey, this video launched 1,000 campaigns against me. Oh my God. And that's okay. That's okay. I guess it created the interest, and yeah, it created a little backlash too, but what are you going to do? You just keep moving forward. And hopefully you do, change people's minds. You do finally get some interest. You do, people do wake up. But sometimes they have to have their backs against the wall before they start exploring your options if there's nothing else left. And some people will never, ever do this, and that's fine. And they choose to stay in their world. That's okay. But I want you guys to know that, yes, I'm okay with my government. Because, yeah, the FTC watches me all the time. The Ohio Attorney General watches me all the time. Yes, the FBI can watch me because I'm getting death threats. Okay. But they did make a point. You put yourself out there. You've got to be responsible. There are crazies. Call 911 if you have an issue, of course. And then, concealed carry and all this other stuff. Absolutely. So
Anyways, there's my other video for today, but I just wanted to give you a thought process that makes sense. So those of you who are vaccine injured, get off the activism for a minute and go get a titer test on your child to prove your claims that your kid was vaccine injured. Understand antibodies. Understand my protocol too, because it talks about why you wouldn't mix A, B, and O blood together. And understand that you do have recourse. You're not stuck with your vaccine injured child. You're not stuck being injured yourself. You're not stuck in this cancer, disease, and chronic illness. But if your whole platform and your whole life is predicated upon this platform, and you're not trying to help yourself or your kid, then hey, then we know that your intention is just to raise hell, but not really get to the root cause and substantiate your claims. Anybody can make a claim. Now it's up to the person to substantiate it. And I was forced to do that. I was forced to substantiate. So I did, and then guess what? The only thing that I was told is you can't make claims without going through the biotech process. Double-blind studies in a lab. That was it. They didn't say, hey, you're wrong. They said you just can't make these in a legal sense, in an advertising sense. Okay, fine. So, so now the system is allowing you guys to take titer tests to prove your vaccinations or your protection. And then you can do titer tests to then go figure out how many antibodies, how many natural killer cells that destroy a person you have in your system. And then you can do titer tests, before jelly juice to figure out how many antibodies you have, and do titer tests after, after a year or two of a heavy jelly juice. And then you can do a titer test on loved ones that have passed away from natural causes to figure out that those marked antibodies. So if they had, ovarian cancer, you can see which pathogen, which antibody was most prevalent at the time. And then you can make a case against the vaccine industry. Because disease doesn't just materialize, it has to get introduced. It does. And even if it was introduced 3 generations back, because the Indians didn't die from ovarian cancer. And if they did, then I would like to know. But I mean, here, look. Go look at the way the Indians, all their different sicknesses, and what they died from, or what they think they died from. But hey, they I don't know. But the Indians would have died a long time ago if disease was that prevalent, to where it took somebody down that quickly, to where you had to get a vaccination. Because they didn't have our medicines. Yeah, they had, natural, they had like herbs and roots and all that to try to ward off maybe parasites or some kind of disease of sorts. But the types of diseases that we're experiencing, like dwarfism, progeria, do you see that in the Indian population? Back then, the caveman, did they have dwarf cavemen? I don't know. Did they have autism in the Indian population before the reservations? But this is how you guys can substantiate, make correlation equals causation, is when you find the antibody that caused your kid to have a neurological issue like autism. The antibodies is going to be your key. It's going to be your proof. So no, jelly juice is not going to kill anybody. It's the antibodies that are already swimming in your body is what kills a person. And you would have already been dead. Okay? So the fact that Bruce Wilmot stopped doing the juice and went back to his practices, and yes, we brought up his antibodies, which were already up anyways. He was already on a death trajectory.
The juice didn't create it or cause it. The juice just energized the system to then repair, and pain is healing, and then he stopped. So all of you who are not in hospice, you do the juice, yes, you're in pain, but you're not going to die from the juice. You're just going to be in pain. You'll heal. You'll deal with it. But you're not going to die. Take too much salt with no water at all, nothing, but nobody just takes salt. I can't even get a spoonful of cinnamon in my mouth, much less a spoonful of salt. Ugh, no. All right, that's all I got to say. What an interesting day. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye. Bye, Masa. Bye, everybody.